My fiance, Kevin, a hot air balloon pilot, had a way of looking at Jean, his first love, that I could never match. Even now, as she clung to him in fear, 1,000 meters above the ground, I saw the gentleness in his gaze, the unshakable resolve to protect her. Moments earlier, we had discovered the helium was leaking, making the balloon's descent unavoidable. Kevin grabbed the tandem parachute, the only one available. Desperation gripped me as I begged, my voice breaking, "Kevin, I'm pregnant with your child. Please take me with you." His response cut deeper than the freezing winds at that altitude. "Caroline, are you serious? Now isn't the time for jealousy or pretending to be pregnant? Jean's scared of heights and doesn't know how to skydive. You'll be fine. We'll meet you on the ground," he said coldly. Before I could argue further, he pried my hands off his arm and secured the straps around Jean, sealing both of our fates. Over his shoulder, Jean's lips curled into a faint, triumphant smile. Turning to the remaining parachute, my relief quickly turned to terror. A large tear in the fabric stared back at me, a deliberate sabotage. A needle hung from the fabric, unmistakably Jean's calling card. Kevin and Jean jumped from the balloon, tethered together by the harness. The wind carried them safely away, leaving me alone in the failing balloon. The damaged parachute offered no salvation as the balloon drifted toward a jagged cliffside. Left with no options, I clutched the broken parachute and jumped, praying it would at least slow my fall. The rushing air stung my skin as I plummeted, the world a blur of sound and motion. Kevin's disbelief in my pregnancy echoed in my mind. "I'm not lying, I really am." But he didn't care. "Stop being so dramatic, Caroline. Be like Jean, calm, dependable," he had said. As the helium hissed relentlessly, marking the balloon's rapid descent, I felt hope slipping away. My heart raced, not only for myself, but for the tiny life growing inside me, a fragile existence that hadn't yet seen the world. The operator's voice crackled through the phone, grounding me for a moment. "Miss Taylor, stay calm. Start by lightening the balloon's load. Toss anything unnecessary to slow the descent," the operator instructed. Following their guidance, I threw out everything I could find. The basket grew lighter, slightly easing the balloon's erratic motion, but the helium leak was faster than I'd anticipated. The edge of the cliff drew closer. Panic gripped my throat as I pleaded, "Please, hurry!" "I don't have much time." Another voice joined the call, introducing himself as Henry, a flight coordinator. "Miss Taylor, where's Kevin?" "Isn't he with you?" he asked. Swallowing hard, I fought back tears. "Kevin jumped. He took Jean with him and left me behind. My parachute is torn. Please help me." Henry sighed, his voice strained. "Unbelievable. Listen, all our pilots are currently airborne, and your location is so remote, we rarely get calls from there. I'll do everything I can, but for now, you'll need to stabilize the situation yourself." Stabilize. The word felt like a cruel joke as the balloon hovered over the abyss. "Do you see the gas valve?" Henry asked. "You need to release some helium to reduce altitude." Scanning the equipment, panic surged through me. "No, if I release gas now, I'll drop straight into the canyon. The descent is too steep." Henry hesitated, his frustration palpable, though he kept his tone measured. "Okay, let's think. Don't panic. Kevin's a professional. He'll come back for you once he's landed. For now, focus on keeping yourself safe." Hearing Kevin's name sparked a flicker of hope, or perhaps foolishness. Grabbing my phone, I dialed him, praying he would answer. The first call went to voicemail, as did the second. On the third try, he picked up, his voice impatient. "What now, Caroline? Are you pretending to be scared of heights to compete with Jean? You've been fine on roller coasters. Don't start this drama now." "Kevin, please," I sobbed, my words trembling. "The parachute is broken. You have to help me." "Stop being ridiculous," he snapped. "Jean's not like you. She's terrified, and her heart is weak. I can't leave her alone. Just jump and stop wasting time." In the background, I heard Jean's faint voice. "Kevin, I feel dizzy. My chest hurts." His tone instantly softened as he reassured her. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll get you to the hospital." Then, addressing me again, his voice turned sharp. "Look, Caroline, we're headed to the hospital. Land safely and go home on your own." Kevin ended the call, and with it, the remnants of our relationship. I realized I had always been the one chasing him, always making the effort while he never moved toward me. We had been neighbors since childhood, and I had loved him silently for 10 long years. In our 10th year, a car accident nearly paralyzed him. His girlfriend at the time, Jean, used the excuse of studying abroad to leave him when things got hard. I stayed. I was the one who cared for him, sat by his bedside, helped with his rehabilitation, and stayed awake through countless nights. Perhaps my devotion moved him, or perhaps he was simply lonely. Either way, he eventually agreed to be with me. Those days were grueling, but they brought a strange kind of happiness. I loved him more than he loved me, and I tried to make up for it with my dedication. But then our anniversary arrived. I prepared his favorite dishes, decorated the table, and waited eagerly for him to come home. Evening turned to night, and midnight came and went, yet he didn't return. When I called, he claimed a colleague had called in sick, so he was covering their shift. It's so late. Who rides a hot air balloon at this hour? I asked, trying to hide my suspicion. Even hot air balloons need maintenance, he replied curtly. When will you be back? I pressed. Later, he said dismissively. I pleaded with him, but every time his answer was the same. Later. Early in the morning, I received a notification on my phone. It was a post from Jean. Reunited after so long. Whether it's the past or present, we always have so much to talk about. How lucky I am to have met you in this lifetime. The accompanying photo showed a lavender-scented candle. In the comments, someone asked who had given it to her. Jean replied, one of the people who liked this post. He made it for me today because he knows I have trouble sleeping. Scrolling through the likes, I saw Kevin's name. That night, Kevin returned home at 3 a.m., reeking of alcohol and lavender. You're still awake? He asked, slurring his words. I already knew the truth, but asked anyway. Working late? His gaze flicked to the untouched food on the table. My colleague insisted on taking me out for dinner to thank me for covering his shift, he said casually. You didn't tell them it was our anniversary? I asked quietly. Kevin sighed, rubbing his temples. Why does it matter so much? Valentine's Day, birthdays. Do we really need to celebrate all of these? Tears welled up, but I forced them back. Is it because Jean is back? His expression darkened. Carolyn, I'm with you now. What more do you want? What more could I want? I was with him, but I would never truly have his heart. Kevin went to bed, leaving me alone on the couch, quietly sobbing into the endless night. Sleep evaded me. Barely an hour later, Jean messaged him, complaining of chest pains. Despite his exhaustion, Kevin didn't hesitate. He grabbed his jacket and rushed to the hospital without a word of complaint. My thoughts drifted back to when we first started dating. I had lovingly made breakfast and opened his door gently to wake him. He jolted upright, his eyes blazing with fury. Can you stop being so irritating? Don't bother me when I'm sleeping, he shouted before hurling a heavy ashtray at me. I couldn't dodge in time, and it struck my forehead, splitting the skin and leaving me bleeding. To this day, the scar remains. Kevin never apologized. Instead, he issued a cold warning. Don't ever wake me again. Back then, I foolishly blamed myself. Now I realize it was never about right or wrong. It was about love and disregard. And I had lost. Suddenly, the hot air balloon burst into flames. The fire spread rapidly, and panic overtook me as the balloon began to plummet. Frantically, I grabbed my phone and called Kevin. Help me! The balloon's on fire! I screamed. His voice on the other end was unnervingly calm. If there's a fire at home, call the fire department. Why are you making such a big deal over something so minor? I barely managed to explain before he cut me off, irritated. I'm at the hospital with Jean. She's seriously hurt. Handle it yourself, he said dismissively, before ending the call. With Kevin, it had always been this way. He made all the decisions, never allowing me to finish a sentence. As for Jean's supposed injury, she still found time to post online. Thank you for showing me the most breathtaking views, even though I'm afraid of heights. I wasn't scared at all during the jump because you were with me. Every moment with you is pure joy. The accompanying video showed footage of them skydiving together, not in a hospital. I didn't have time to process it. The flames were closing in fast. If I didn't act, I would either burn alive or crash to my death. Tears blurred my vision as I held my stomach. I'm so sorry, baby. I failed you in this life, I whispered. With trembling hands, I sent one final message. It's over. You win. Let's be strangers in the next life. And then I jumped. My soul found itself in a hospital, where Jean was resting comfortably in Kevin's arms. I had this awful chest pain, she said weakly. I thought I was dying. Kevin stroked her hair tenderly. Don't say such silly things, he murmured, feigning concern. Jean looked up at him. Is Caroline okay? She kept calling you earlier. Kevin scoffed. What could happen to her? Back in college, she was the only one brave enough to ride roller coasters. I even taught her to skydive once. She's fine. She's probably overreacting about something, claiming there's a fire at home. Jean's expression turned serious. A fire? Are you sure? Shouldn't you check on it? Kevin hesitated briefly before shaking his head. I told her to call the fire department. Even if I went back, I couldn't do anything about it. You're the patient right now, and you're more important. He looked at Jean with such tenderness, it pierced through me, even in death. My heart ached. Was my life so insignificant to him? He didn't even ask a single question about me. For 2 years, I had cared for him while he was confined to a wheelchair. And for what? Indifference. When Kevin requested time off to care for Jean, his boss, Adam, was firm. Get back to work, he ordered. I followed Kevin's spirit, tethered to his movements. Adam's face was stern as he questioned him. Who authorized you to take someone to the landing zone? It's notorious for being treacherous. Without expertise, emergency skydiving there is practically suicide. Kevin shrugged nonchalantly. It wasn't just random tourists. One was my girlfriend, and the other was a close friend. My girlfriend knows how to skydive. She wouldn't have any issues. Adam wasn't convinced. Rescue received a distress call, but no one was found at the landing site. It's likely the person veered off course and didn't survive. That person was probably your fiancée, Caroline Taylor. Kevin hesitated briefly before pulling out his phone. Caroline texted me earlier. She's upset I left her to skydive and even mentioned breaking up. Adam didn't pry into their personal issues, but firmly reminded him, even if they're close to you, don't take people to high-risk zones. If something goes wrong, it's everyone's responsibility. Kevin apologized insincerely, but Adam wasn't satisfied. You wanted to impress your girlfriend, but you can't break rules or misuse authority to do so. It had been Jean's idea. The day before, she had begged Kevin. We're such good friends. Of course, we should conquer the hardest landing zone together. He gave in to her whims. Now, Adam spent another half hour reprimanding him. As punishment, Kevin was suspended for 3 days and lost a month's pay. Despite everything, Kevin bore no grudge toward Jean. Instead, his frustration was directed at me. My spirit watched as he typed a series of angry texts. Caroline, why would you call rescue? Was it necessary to be so dramatic? I didn't take you skydiving this time. So what? You're breaking up with me and reporting me to Adam? Do you have to be so petty? Are you happy now that you've blown this out of proportion? Why can't you be more understanding, like Jean? When I didn't respond, he ruffled his hair in frustration. Fine, don't reply. Two can play this game. I wanted to scream at him for his shamelessness, for twisting the truth, but I was already dead. Later that evening, my mother, Eliana, visited Kevin. Why isn't Caroline answering my calls? Is she with you? She asked. Kevin quickly masked his irritation. She hasn't contacted me either, he replied. Eliana frowned. You two fought again, didn't you? She sighed, her voice softening. Don't think I'm meddling, but do you remember how long you were sick after the car accident? Caroline cared for you just as long. She stayed up nights, took you to every doctor she could find, and never left your side. Meanwhile, Jean packed her bags and flew overseas. Eliana paused before adding, Caroline loves you deeply. She even planned to tell you she was pregnant on your birthday. Kevin's face went pale, as though he had been struck. Caroline is pregnant? He asked, his voice shaking. Eliana pulled out my ultrasound report. Yes, absolutely. Kevin stared at the image of the tiny life. A faint smile crossed his lips. I'm going to be a father. I'm going to be a father, he repeated softly. But it was too late. My child and I were already gone, lost to the afterlife. Kevin, if there's another life, I won't let you be my child's father, nor do I ever want to see you again, I thought bitterly. After exchanging a few more pointed words, Eliana left, her tone sharp as she remarked, It's easy to see who truly cares for you. As soon as she was gone, Kevin's phone buzzed. Adam was calling. Come to the police station. Bring Jean and your fiancé for questioning, he instructed. The mention of a police report immediately soured Kevin's newfound excitement about becoming a father. Frustration took over, and his thoughts rang loud and clear. Caroline, you're nothing but a headache. Meeting you has brought me nothing but bad luck. Kevin fired off 2 messages as if I could still read them. Since you're really pregnant, I'll overlook the rescue call. We need to go to the station for questioning. See you there. You're going to be a mother. Try acting like it. Grabbing his keys, he left to pick up Jean. Jean's guilt was obvious. Kevin, what's going on? Did something happen to Caroline? She asked hesitantly. Kevin, completely oblivious to her unease, reassured her casually. Nothing serious. It's just Caroline causing trouble again. Just tell the truth when we get there. His unwavering confidence in my safety made even Jean doubt whether I was really dead. Is Caroline coming too? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Of course. This mess is her fault, so she's the one who needs to deal with it, Kevin replied. Noticing her pale face and trembling hands, he asked, Jean, why are you sweating? Are you feeling okay? Jean, visibly shaken, forced a weak smile. It's just warm in here, she mumbled. Ever attentive to Jean, Kevin fussed over her, completely disregarding the possibility that I might have died. Jean steeled herself and accompanied him to the station, but naturally, I wasn't there. Officer Michael greeted them with a straightforward question. Where is Caroline Taylor? Kevin sighed, exasperated. She's being difficult. She called rescue and threatened to break up. It's really not a big deal. Sorry to bother you with this. Jean clung tightly to Kevin's arm, her demeanor overly intimate. Michael raised an eyebrow. I assumed she was your girlfriend, he remarked. Jean quickly let go and stammered awkwardly. We're just close friends. Michael turned his attention back to Kevin. So, when the helium started leaking from the balloon, you decided to skydive with your friend, leaving your pregnant fiancée behind? My fiancée knows how to skydive, Kevin replied nonchalantly. Jean is afraid of heights and had no experience. I had no choice but to take her down first. Michael pressed further. Caroline claimed during her call that the parachute was damaged. Kevin chuckled humorlessly. That's just her being dramatic. She was arguing with me earlier and even threatening to break up. I'm a pilot. It's my job to check the parachutes. Whether it's for tourists or my girlfriend, I always make sure they're safe. I can guarantee that parachute was fine. As Kevin spoke with such confidence, Jean grew more anxious, but managed to feign innocence. Smiling sweetly, she added, Kevin is the most professional person I know. He'd never overlook something like that. Without solid evidence, the police couldn't contradict them. If you manage to get in touch with Caroline Taylor, have her come here in person, Michael said. I stood between them, invisible, a mere shadow of the person I once was. As they left the station, the trouble was far from over. Feigning guilt, Jean murmured, This is all my fault. If only I knew how to skydive, Caroline wouldn't have been so jealous, and none of this would have happened. Her act worked perfectly, stirring Kevin's protective instincts. It's not your fault. Caroline is just being immature. I've taken other female customers skydiving before, and she never acted like this. She's probably just hormonal because of the pregnancy. Don't blame yourself, he said. It was only after my death that I realized Jean had rushed her plan because of my pregnancy. Desperate to secure her position, she executed her scheme flawlessly. But the truth was, she didn't need to go to such lengths. I already knew Kevin could never truly love me. The questioning left Jean uneasy. That night, she clung to Kevin, saying, Can you stay with me tonight? I'm scared to be alone. She wanted to keep him close in case the investigation escalated, giving her time to flee if necessary. Oblivious to her manipulations, Kevin stayed with her, acting like the perfect boyfriend. He brought her tea, was patient when she woke him in the middle of the night, and didn't show a hint of irritation. Meanwhile, my shattered emotions turned from heartbreak to bitterness. But that night, fate took another turn. The flaming balloon had crashed into a tree, igniting a forest fire. Firefighters worked quickly to extinguish the flames, and while clearing the wreckage, they discovered my charred remains. The police notified Eliana and Kevin's sister, Evelyn. They tried reaching Kevin as well, but he was with Jean, his phone on silent. Evelyn accompanied my devastated mother to the site, fearing Eliana wouldn't be able to handle the shock alone. No parent should ever have to see their child like that. At first, Eliana refused to believe it was me. Then, she saw the necklace around my neck, the one she had custom-made for my birthday. Faced with the undeniable reality of my lifeless body, she collapsed in tears. Evelyn, overwhelmed with grief, vowed through sobs, If this is Kevin's fault, I won't let him get away with it. My body was transported to the funeral home, and the police launched an investigation. Eliana and Evelyn immediately confronted Kevin, finding him cheerfully buying breakfast and doting on Jean. Eliana lost control, flipping the table. My daughter's dead, and you're sitting here eating like nothing happened? She shouted. Jean cowered behind Kevin, terrified. Kevin, clueless about the truth, assumed I had orchestrated everything with Eliana to cause more trouble. Eliana, can you and Caroline stop playing games? She already got me suspended and docked a month's pay over that fake rescue call. Isn't that enough? Evelyn snapped. She slapped Kevin hard across the face, leaving his cheek red and swollen. Caroline was carrying your child, and you left her to die. Don't you realize they're both gone now? She screamed. Kevin, still in denial, retorted, This is just another one of Caroline's stunts. Are you helping her pull this off? Evelyn's voice was sharp with fury. A stunt? You call this a stunt? She was left with a faulty parachute. How was she supposed to survive? Kevin's eyes widened in shock. Jean, trying to feign guilt, muttered, "If only I knew how to skydive, none of this would have happened." Evelyn's rage flared again. She slapped Jean hard. "You sabotaged your parachute, didn't you?" Jean clutched her cheek, tears streaming, as Kevin stepped in to defend her. "If you're accusing Jean, you'd better have proof. This is just another conspiracy against her." Still, he claimed, "Jean and I are just friends." She had no reason to act so maliciously, Kevin thought, his mind swirling with confusion. "I was going to take responsibility for Caroline and our baby. Jean wasn't a threat to her. Why would she do something like this?" Jean began to cry softly, her tears tugging at Kevin's emotions. "It's all my fault," she said, her voice trembling. "If Caroline hated me, I can't blame her. She's so fortunate to have people like you standing up for her." Evelyn's patience snapped entirely. Her sharp glare landed on Jean as she spoke with venom. "Stop pretending to be the innocent victim. When my brother was in a car accident and stuck in a wheelchair, you disappeared faster than a rabbit. You ran away from hardship. But now that he's doing well and happy with someone else, you slither back to seduce him. Have you no shame?" Kevin quickly leapt to Jean's defense. "Watch your words, Evelyn. Jean has a heart condition. She went abroad for treatment, that's why she left," he argued. "Treatment?" Evelyn's voice turned icy, her pain palpable. "She left because she's a gold digger who despises poverty. Let me tell you something, Kevin. Caroline jumped while clutching a torn parachute with all her strength. This wasn't just an accident. It was injustice. If you don't believe me, go see for yourself." Evelyn's words hung heavily in the air, like a blade poised to drop. "The police have already started an investigation. Pray that none of you become suspects," she added. Her declaration sent visible panic through Jean, whose face betrayed her fear and guilt. Even so, Kevin continued to deny reality. Or perhaps he couldn't bring himself to accept the truth. "Stop talking about death," he snapped. "There are no suspects here, and you're scaring Jean." Jean, pale and trembling, clutched her chest dramatically. "Kevin, my heart, it hurts so much," she gasped, pretending to be on the verge of collapse. Kevin, panicked, rushed to her side. "I'll take you to the hospital. Hold on," he said urgently, helping her. As he moved to assist Jean, Evelyn stormed toward him, shouting angrily. Kevin, overwhelmed with concern for Jean, pushed Evelyn aside in his haste. Eliana immediately rushed to help Evelyn to her feet, and the two clung to each other, sobbing uncontrollably. At that moment, I felt a deep regret for my past stubbornness. If only I had let go of my obsession with Kevin. If only I had walked away when Jean came back into his life, everything might have been different. Kevin didn't love me, and no matter how much Jean had betrayed him in the past, he still adored her. His love for her was unwavering, just as my own love for him once was. As I watched my mother, Eliana, and Evelyn mourn my death, my soul was weighed down with guilt. At the hospital, Jean concocted an excuse to send Kevin away, claiming she had a craving for cake. While he was gone, she used the opportunity to flee, trying to escape the consequences of her actions. When Kevin returned to the hospital room with the cake, he found it empty. Shocked, he immediately called Jean, hoping to reach her. Her voice was soft and evasive. "Kevin, I have to go abroad for surgery. The medication here isn't helping," she explained vaguely. Confused, and Kevin replied, "But you already had heart surgery." "What's going on?" Jean hesitated before fumbling for an answer. "I can't explain right now. My dad is coming to get me, and I need to board the plane." The call abruptly ended before Kevin could press further. Jean's strange behavior left Kevin unsettled. A sense of dread crept over him, and he frantically typed out a message to me. "Caroline, Eliana, and Evelyn said you're dead. That can't be true, right? You're lying to me, aren't you? Jean's going abroad again." His fingers trembled as he sent the messages, his thoughts scattered and incoherent. "Caroline, are you there? Please, answer me." Kevin's face twisted with anxiety as he stared at the phone, his eyes vacant and lost. From afar, I watched him with a calm heart. If I could have answered, I would have said, "In the next life, I never want to see you again." Perhaps it was Jean's sudden escape or my silence that finally triggered something in Kevin. He quickly got into his car and drove straight to the funeral home. Inside, the mortician was preparing my body, while Eliana and Evelyn stood nearby, their grief overwhelming. When Kevin saw my lifeless form, he froze in shock. As he tried to approach, the police stopped him. "Only family members are allowed," they said. Tears filled Kevin's eyes, and he shouted desperately, "She's my fiancée! Let me see her!" At Eliana's nod, the officers stepped aside. Kevin approached my body, staring at my pale, lifeless face. The truth hit him like a tidal wave, and he collapsed to his knees. His lips trembled as he whispered, "Caroline, this can't be real." He reached out with a shaking hand to touch my face, but Eliana intervened sharply. "Don't touch my daughter! You don't deserve it!" she yelled, shoving him away. Normally a strong man, Kevin was easily pushed back by her force. He muttered to himself, "It's impossible." Carolyn was carrying my child. She wouldn't die. Evelyn, unable to contain her anger, retorted harshly, "Oh, right. We're all just pretending, and Jean's the only one who's truly honest and kind, isn't she? Let's see how your dear Jean deals with the murder she caused." Kevin refused to believe Jean was responsible. "Jean didn't kill anyone," he said weakly. "Do you even believe that yourself?" Evelyn shot back. "If she's innocent, why did she run when she heard about the case? Admit it, Kevin. You can't even convince yourself. That's why you're here now at the funeral home, staring at Caroline's body." Kevin's tears finally spilled over. But what use was his regret now? Even if I could see his sorrow, I would never forgive him. I could have survived. Our child could have survived if Kevin had acted differently. But his negligence and blind indulgence of Jean had sealed our fate. Kevin stayed by my body through the night, whispering apologies and confessions that no longer mattered. If I could do it all again, I would have left him long before this tragedy unfolded. But now it was too late. I appeared at Kevin's window one last time. His disheveled, hollow appearance was unrecognizable. For a moment, it seemed as though he could see me. "Caroline, I love you," he said, his voice breaking. Without a word, I turned away. "But I no longer love you.